The studio lights were still warming when Samuel L. Jackson leaned back in his chair, eyes sharp, jaw set, taking in the room like a veteran who had walked onto countless stages and sets but immediately sensed when something was off. The audience applauded at the usual cues, the applause sign blinking on and off like a heartbeat, but beneath the surface there was an uneasy current. Greg Gutfeld flashed his familiar grin, the one that suggested mischief wrapped in confidence, and tossed out an opening joke that danced along the edge of respect. At first, Jackson smiled politely, letting it slide the way seasoned guests often do. He crossed one leg over the other, hands folded, posture relaxed but alert, as if he were waiting for the real conversation to begin. The second jab came faster, sharper, wrapped in sarcasm and framed as humor. A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd, thinner this time, uncertain. Jackson's smile faded, he tilted his head slightly, eyes narrowing not in anger but in focus. When he spoke, his voice didn't boom or bark. It came low, steady, controlled. He corrected the point calmly, reminding Gutfeld that there was a difference between provocation and conversation. The room shifted, even the band at the edge of the stage froze, hands hovering over instruments that suddenly felt irrelevant. Gutfeld leaned forward, sensing the spark and choosing to fan it. He interrupted, waving a hand dismissively, tossing out a line that reframed Jackson's words into something easier to mock. The host chuckled, inviting the audience along for the ride. This time, the laughter stumbled. Jackson's fingers tightened around the armrest, a small, telling movement. He inhaled slowly, then spoke again, more firmly now, his words precise, each syllable placed with intention. He spoke about being heard, about how debates weren't won by shouting over people, and about the exhaustion of constantly having to defend one's right to speak without being turned into a punchline. The cameras zoomed in, a producer's voice crackled faintly in someone's earpiece. Gutfeld tried to regain control with another joke, but it landed flat, bouncing awkwardly off the tension hanging in the air. Jackson leaned forward, breaking the comfortable distance between guest and host. His presence seemed to fill the studio, not because he was loud, but because he was unwavering. The audience could feel it, that moment when entertainment slips into something raw and unscripted. Gutfeld attempted to pivot, but Jackson cut in, not with aggression, but with authority. He spoke about respect, about how disagreement didn't require dismissal, about how conversations were supposed to challenge ideas, not diminish people. His voice rose slightly, not in volume but in intensity, and the room responded instinctively, falling completely silent. No applause sign could manufacture noise now. This wasn't a cue, it was a reckoning. The host's grin tightened. He tried one last time to lighten the mood, tossing out a sarcastic remark meant to reset the tone. Instead, it did the opposite. Jackson paused, stood up slowly, the scrape of his chair echoing louder than any shout. For a split second, it looked like the show might recover, like someone might step in with a joke or a commercial break timed perfectly to defuse the situation. But the moment had already passed that point. Jackson looked directly at Gutfeld, eyes steady, expression firm. He said he wasn't there to be disrespected, that he'd agreed to a conversation, not a spectacle. His words were clear, unhurried, impossible to twist. Security moved subtly from the wings, more cautious than confrontational. The director counted down frantically, fingers slicing the air. As Jackson took a step away from the chair, the studio lights seemed harsher, exposing every uncomfortable reaction. Gutfeld's forced smile, the audience's stunned faces, the crew frozen between professionalism and disbelief. Just before the screen cut to black, Jackson delivered one final line, quiet but definitive, the kind that lingered long after the sound faded. It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. The break hit abruptly, music swelling too late, leaving behind a studio full of people who knew they had just witnessed a moment that would be replayed, debated, and dissected far beyond the walls of that stage. Backstage, the hum of activity felt louder than it ever did on a normal taping day. Crew members clustered near monitors replaying the final seconds on a loop, each time wincing at the same moment Jackson stood up. The applause sign lay dark now, useless, while producers spoke in urgent whispers, trying to decide whether the break would save the show or make the moment even bigger. Samuel L. Jackson walked past them without a word, his stride steady, his face calm in a way that felt almost unsettling after what had just unfolded on stage. In the hallway outside the studio, the air cooled. Jackson paused near a framed poster of past guests, names and faces frozen in glossy smiles. He exhaled, the tension easing from his shoulders. A junior producer approached, clearly nervous, offering an apology that came out tangled and rushed. Jackson listened, nodded once, and thanked them for saying it. He made it clear, without bitterness, that his issue wasn't with the staff or even disagreement itself, it was with being treated like a prop in someone else's routine. His voice was firm but even, the kind that carried weight without needing volume. Inside the studio, Greg Gutfeld adjusted his tie, forcing a laugh as someone suggested they jump back in with a lighter segment. The laughter didn't catch. The audience sat stiff, unsure whether to clap when the cameras rolled again. Gutfeld tried to explain the breakaway as passionate debate, but the words felt thin, already outdated. The energy had shifted. Whatever rhythm the show usually relied on had been broken, replaced by a cautious stiffness that no joke could quite fix. Meanwhile, phones buzzed. Clips leaked almost instantly, shaky footage from audience members already circulating online. Social media lit up with arguments, hot takes, and slow-motion breakdowns of Jackson's expressions, his pauses, the exact moment the smile disappeared. Some praised him for standing his ground, others debated the nature of provocative entertainment, and many simply replayed the scene in disbelief that it had happened at all. What was meant to be another viral soundbite had turned into a flashpoint. Jackson's driver waited outside, engine idling. Before getting in, Jackson stopped and spoke briefly with his team. He wasn't angry, not in the explosive sense people expected. He was resolute. He talked about boundaries, about how years in the industry had taught him when to walk away and when to speak up. This, he said, had been one of those moments where silence would have said the wrong thing. The car door closed softly behind him, sealing off the noise of the studio and the growing storm online. Back inside, producers debated damage control. Statements were drafted and redrafted. Should they apologize publicly? Should they double down? The network's legal team weighed in, reminding everyone that moments like these lived forever once they escaped the studio. Gutfeld sat alone for a moment, staring at his desk, the confidence that usually powered him dulled by the realization that control had slipped through his fingers live on air. By the next morning, headlines were everywhere, each one framing the incident differently but all circling the same core question: where was the line between confrontation and disrespect? Morning shows dissected the body language. Commentators argued about free speech, civility, and the responsibilities that came with a platform. Jackson's final line, quiet, measured, unmistakable, was quoted repeatedly, stripped of context by some, held up as a standard by others. Jackson himself stayed mostly silent. When he finally spoke, it was through a brief statement that refused to inflame the situation. He said conversations mattered, but only when everyone in them was treated as human first. No insults, no theatrics. Just that. The restraint only amplified the impact. Fans and critics alike noted how the man known for explosive roles had chosen composure instead of spectacle. Long after the studio lights dimmed and the set was reset for the next taping, the moment lingered. It became a reference point, a clip people returned to whenever debates about media, respect, and provocation resurfaced. For some, it was just another viral clash. For others, it was a reminder that even in spaces built on confrontation, there were lines that, once crossed, changed everything.